Let's bring in Sky's correspondent Katie Spencer, monitoring the development outside that new broadcasting house. So did we learn anything more there from Tim Davie, do you feel, Katie?
I don't know. I think it becomes, each time that we have these briefings from Tim Davie now, even more and more frustrating. Can we just park for 1 minute what he said in that interview? The fact that Tim Davie, the Director General, all of us broadcast outlets from other broadcasters have asked for interviews with Tim Davie. We've been told he's not giving any interviews. If the BBC is supposed to be open, fair, honest and is upfront about what's going on, to only give an interview to a BBC outlet, to avoid walking in any of the entrances or exits here at the building, for Tim Davie to have gone in via the loading bay to avoid having to answer any of our questions. It just is, it beggars belief really that it doesn't seem to be that, certainly even in the interactions that they're having with journalists, they're being honest and open and giving people a chance to actually put questions to the BBC. The fact that this Q&A press briefing was done via Zoom, we're not in times of COVID anymore, and yet the journalists weren't allowed to speak directly to the Director General. Instead, we had to tap out questions that we of course couldn't ask follow-up questions to when he avoided answering our questions. That interview, let's dive into what he said there then. Look, he said of the initial complaint, he wouldn't go into any specifics of how that initial complaint has differed to the response that they gave last week after The Sun published his article. He's again citing the fact that he has been told, the BBC has been told by the police to pause its investigation. So they're clearly going to use that as a means of not explaining exactly in any detail what differed from this initial complaint to what differed in their response last week. They've again repeating these lines of it's all down to duty of care, it's all down to privacy, but they are balancing this up against the public interest. He set out the fact that the investigations unit was under a large amount of pressure. 250 complaints within 6 months, what he said. But again, does that really offer any explanation for the fact that all they appeared to do was send one email which didn't get a response and make one phone call which didn't connect? They didn't even, according to this log, bother to follow it up with any other further phone calls or emails. A bit of detail we do know that we didn't have from the press briefing, that it was a call, by all accounts, that the complainant made in the first place, a 29-minute call, and judged from the recording of that call is where the investigations team judged whether or not this was, as they did, they were taking it seriously, but they didn't believe that there was any criminality to this. Again, he spoke about how they will be looking at the protocols going forward, that whether or not they take red flag incidents, things are red flagged higher up the chain quickly enough. And that, I mean, is the key from what we've learned in the last couple of hours. Clearly they weren't moving quickly enough when it comes to acting on things like this. Sarah Montague highlighted the fact that now the parents have hit out and described the BBC as being liars for saying that they weren't told the information of the bank accounts and the transactions. He avoided answering what information the investigation teams had actually been told. Again, Sarah Montague asked whether or not they knew whether the money for this young person in question's lawyers was coming from the presenter, and the Director General said he didn't know where the money was coming from, but it wasn't something for the BBC to comment on. Surely it is imperative for the BBC to know whether it is the presenter itself that is paying for this young person's legal fees. And as well, Sarah Montague pointed out, is it not a bit odd, the fact that the Director General hasn't spoken to this presenter that's on a 6-figure salary about exactly what's going on? Tim Davie said it's not appropriate, and instead it's a senior manager's role to interact with the presenter. Again, I mean, I don't think any of those answers that he gave were particularly satisfactory, and if anything, for all the journalists who are trying to get answers, it's just hugely frustrating.